Welcome back to I-86 After Dark, and we have, of course, another exclusive interview today. And this is actually a guest we've been wanting to get for a while, and we're certainly happy to have him. Of course, people on Long Island know him very well. People with the Green Bay Packers know him well. We have Gil Martin here with us. So, Gil, first, welcome to the show, and we're glad to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. I was looking forward to this. Glad we could finally get it done.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, I got to tell you, we've had maybe three or four other interviews in the last month and a half or so, and one of the very first people that we wanted to get was you. And we figured, you're kind of like the voice of the Islander community that's not, Brendan Burke. So I think from retrospective.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's great to be here. And hey, you want me to talk Islanders hockey? I'm always ready. So it's great.
Good
Let's
stuff.
go.
Good stuff. So, yeah, so we wanted to kind of just dive into your career a little bit. And first and foremost, a lot of people who may be watching are wondering, where did it all begin?
It kind of began when I wrote my book, Ice Wars, which talks about the history of the rivalry between the Islanders and the Rangers from 1972. Well, I published it in 2016, so it was up until then. And I really wanted to do this full time, and was able to get that book published and then sort of run with it, and got the gig with Locked On 2019, right before the pandemic, and really enjoyed that. And any time I can share my love of hockey and talk and give my opinions and interact with listeners and viewers, I love it. So it's a dream come true for me.
Absolutely. I mean, in movies and Hollywood and video games, every villain has an origin story. So I guess my question to you, Gil, is that what drew you to be a hockey fan and what inspired you?
Wow. I mean, I've been a hockey fan since I was five. Okay, so it's tough to remember. I think I was just watching. My dad was watching games, and I sat down next to him and watched, and was just excited by it. But my very first game that I went to at the Nassau Coliseum was actually the last home game of the Islanders' first season, and
Ooh.
they played the Buffalo Sabres. I got to see
Okay.
Gilbert Perreault and the French Connection line.
Hmm.
Jerry Desjardins was the goalie for the Islanders. The Islanders got badly outshot. They lost 3-2 because Desjardins, who later played for the Sabres, stood on his head. And but I remember Gilbert Perreault taking the puck from behind the goal and going coast to coast and just being like, "Wow, look at that guy
Yeah,
go." And I was 6 at the time, so it's but that was my first NHL game that I got to attend.
that's
Holy damn.
awesome. That's awesome. And it's actually it's interesting you mentioned the French Connection. I mean, they're well known up here in Buffalo, and that's actually where I'm from. And I didn't get to see them play. I just wasn't born yet until the early '80s. But just knowing the impact that they had, and it actually reminds me, and Bobby can tell you, my first game in the old Nassau Coliseum was actually when we played the Islanders back in 2019. It ended up being right before Phil Housley got fired. So it
Oh
was the
wow.
week before. And I remember the Islanders blew us out. But it was a great time. I mean, it's definitely one of the arenas I remember, and I've been to a handful of older ones too. Been in the old Igloo. I actually lived in Pittsburgh a short time, and then of course I grew up with the old Memorial Auditorium here in Buffalo too, and saw that come down in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But no, the barn was that was a lot of fun. I gotta say, and you guys absolutely are passionate, which is always great to see.
Yeah, I mean, look, the barn was nothing fancy, but the sight lines were great. It
Hmm.
was loud as hell.
Yep.
And, it may have been a dump by the time it was kind of being phased out, but it was our dump, and
Right.
it was home.
Yeah.
And, you tailgate before the game, you go to the game. I was home in 20 minutes after the game
Yeah.
because it was so conveniently located. And, the fans were a community. The press box was a
Mhm.
community. It was really a great place to watch a hockey game. bathrooms were terrible. It was crowded in the out in the corridors outside the seats, but the actual experience of watching the game was great.
Yep. And it reminds me of the audits in so many ways. Bathrooms were brutal. We had the really steep upper deck that felt like you were going to be falling face first if you took a wrong step. Of course, not having the regulation ice surface, because I think it was only
Yeah.
about 10 feet shorter than what it was supposed to be. But just seeing some of the legendary battles that took place, especially when I was growing up, was huge. Of course, I know the Sabres and the Islanders had some good battles back at that time, and they still do. But some of the things I can think of, and likewise, you'd say, of course, the Rangers and the Islanders. We had, of course, Buffalo and Toronto, which those two teams absolutely hate each other. And then, of course, and even still now they do, because the last time I was at a game in the KeyBank Center, there was probably about 20 people that got thrown out in a huge fight that broke out in one of the aisleways that they had to close off. But then I also look back, Sabres and Nordiques were a huge thing back in the day too, and I know you guys have had some legendary rivalries on your own, so it kind of hits home with how you're talking about the barn, and yeah, and the odd was our dump, but we loved it, and I know you guys loved the barn too.
Yeah, we did. And look, I miss you had the three old rinks. You had Chicago, Buffalo, and Boston
Hmm.
that used to be smaller than regulation size, and the teams kind of built their roster
Yeah.
around that fact, and it worked. I mean, it made those locations when you were going on the road. You had to play a little differently. You had to think a little
Mhm.
differently,
Yeah.
and you knew you were in for like a physical kind of a game.
Mhm.
I would look forward to those kind of games.
Yeah, same here. And even a lot of cases too. One of the players I remember we had on the Sabres back at that time, Alexander Mogilny, finally getting inducted in the Hall of Fame. And he should have been in there a long time ago, in my opinion. But just, and like you mentioned, you had the physicality. You had to adjust for the speed, and of course it was just a quicker game as well.
Yeah,
It's one of those you saw a lot more of that. And I'd even throw Toronto's old Maple Leaf Gardens in the mix too. I mean, even though they had the regulation size, and actually I've taken Bobby in there twice now since because they do have it open still to the public. It's just been redone in a lot of ways, but it's one of those just one of those original buildings and going into those older style places. I mean, it means so much to the fan bases. And yes, they do have still the original center ice in Maple Leaf Gardens, and I've shown them that aisle
nice.
21 inside the Loblaws grocery store that opened there, and part of it.
Very nice. I also got to give a shout out to the Hartford Civic Center, which I do miss. The Whalers were fun. That my first press box game was in Hartford, and it was funny because I got to meet two people up in the press box that I remember really well. The first was Joel Quenville, who was a scout at
Hmm.
that time. And when he shook my hand, I felt like Wiley Coyote when he had the accordion hand after something.
Yeah.
Like he had
Yep.
the hardest handshake of anybody I ever met. And then
Nice.
the other person that I met there, ironically, was Ace Bailey, who passed away on 9/11, obviously.
Sure.
But, just like that being my first press box experience, two guys who I remember as players who I grew up with. It's funny. I've done so many interviews over the years for my book, at post game, all that
Yeah.
stuff. Uh, I am totally like I could walk up to Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid and be totally fine. But you put me in front of a player who I grew up watching when I was a little kid, and I'm like a little kid again. It's like a weird thing that happens.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that it's like that with me too. It's like when I talk to, athletes, because we do this all the time as a side job or a hobby, for if you will. And we usually get people like Darius Gasparaitis, you, or anybody else for that matter, that we've gotten on the show in the past. And usually with people I grew up watching in the 90s and early 2000s, I'm like a little kid. I pissed my pants. And it comes, I'm like, oh my God, I'm talking to these guys.
Yeah,
I'm like, holy
Right.
shit, I would never think I would ever be talking to them. But here I
Yeah.
am, a middle-aged guy, and I'm just like, wow, I'm talking to people I grew up watching playing hockey or football or any
Yeah.
sport I could think
yep,
of.
yeah,
Yeah. It reminds me of an experience, kind of like what Bobby was saying as well too. Just having met Rob Ray a few times here locally, he's been one of those people I loved watching growing up. But even more recently, being able to meet Pat Coletta in person, and he was part of the Fan Connection, which is a Buffalo Sabres documentary that came out within the past couple years, and we had the creators of them on of that documentary on the show as well. We've interviewed them a couple times, and being able to meet Coletta, and one of the funny stories, and Coletta had like this laugh when I ended up asking him this question on stage, and basically talking to him about how he beat the crap out of Derek Dorsett in that one Columbus Blue Jackets game where he ended up throwing about 15 left hooks right to the face, and talking about it's like, hey, we all appreciate that, but just talking about the physical style that he played, and just another one that a lot of people liked here locally, and then one person I do wish I would have been able to meet in person was good old Rick Jeanneret before he passed away, and
Yeah.
had the opportunity. I was at a signing. It wasn't there in time, but got to see him drive off and in his SUV. But still, he was definitely one I would have absolutely loved to have a chance to say hi, and same thing, shake his hand and just
Yep.
talk about the good old days.
I was fortunate enough to meet him. I actually, for a little while, was doing statistics for visiting media whenever they needed somebody, and I did get to do stats for Rick Jeanneret once. And very nice guy, very easy to
Yeah,
work with, a real pros pro, and I enjoyed that experience working with him.
Oh
awesome.
yeah, and RJ is a legend in that area for certain. I mean, I think
Hmm.
any like hardcore hockey fan would just appreciate the talent that he brought to the
Yeah,
Sabres. Because I always say this about Ray Lewis is that he is the Baltimore Ravens. Rick Jeanneret is the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, yeah, for generations. I mean,
yeah.
if you were a Sabres fan, you grew up, watching him, listening to him, and just enjoying his unique style. So
Mhm.
he was Buffalo, in that sense, and that was a beautiful thing.
Yep. Yeah. And shortly after the passing too, they did rename they in his honor, they actually have Perry Street in front of the KeyBank Center now known as RJ Way. So they did designate it as that just as a city designation. So definitely glad to see that. And of course there was a huge tribute that they did in front of the KeyBank Center when that first happened also. And the fans absolutely came out, which was good to see. So but that being said, we know you've gotten into podcasting a lot more recently, and what drew you into to wanting to expand into that genre?
You know, I guess I was always a talker, public speaking never bothered me. I always kind of felt at ease talking about the things that I was passionate about. And, when I got the opportunity, at Locked On, I just jumped at it. I was doing some smaller things on the side before that, but Locked On kind of was a real opportunity. They were just starting out their hockey division in 2019, and I was one of the first ones to join it. I've been there ever since, and it's been great. It really has.
Well, that's a certainty because I mean, I gotta confess, I'm an everyday listener and I hear you talk about everyday, content, and I truly respect that. It's like, in the dog days of summer, people are always asking, what the hell are we going to talk about now? Nobody's signing anywhere. No one's getting traded. Training camp's right around the corner. Ah, shit. What do we do now? Oh, wait, I could just go on Spotify. And you know what? You're actually my blessing and like my saving grace on a daily, consistent basis because I actually do parks and recreational stuff. And usually my music and my phone, it's usually like Appalachian music because I'm a big, bluegrass guy. But because we have Spotify over at my job, you're always the first guy I listen to every day.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, it's not always easy coming up with content in July and August, but once you get to mid-July, because the beginning of July, you got the free agent frenzy and
Yep.
everything's a little crazy. But you get to like July 10th until September 1st, it is a little more challenging to come up with
Mhm.
things. But eventually you get comfortable figuring out the different ways that you can create content. And the one thing I don't want to do is just do like stuff that isn't substantial, stuff that's fluff or pure speculation. Like you'll see these articles sometimes that'll say like projected trade to by this team to this team would bring in $28 million player. Well, who made the projection? You did. You just made this up. And it's one thing if there's a rumor and somebody who is connected is saying, okay, I heard a rumor that the Islanders might be trying to trade Noah Dobson, and eventually it does happen, or sometimes it doesn't happen. But that's one thing, and I will report that from a reliable source. But if someone is just saying, hey, this trade would be a good idea,
Right.
you're making up your own story. You're not supposed to be the news. You're supposed to report the news.
Right.
Right.
And another comparable I can even think of sometimes when we're broadcasting on the football side of things is sometimes we'll see these stories that come out and we're like, are you like trying to dream up this trade from like Madden 2024 or
Right.
something? And it just makes
Exactly.
absolutely no sense on some of them.
Exactly. And then some of the proposed trades that people make just make no sense. It's like, well, I could tell you right now, like there were rumors that that the Edmonton Oilers were interested in Ilya Sorokin. I'm sure they were, but he has a full no trade clause. His agent said he doesn't want to go anywhere. And the Islanders aren't trading him unless, Connor McDavid comes back the other way, which isn't
Right.
happening.
Which is like a 0% chance of happening.
Exactly. So it was just like, yeah, you could make a story about that, but there's got to be something behind it. You can't just make it up out of thin air. And it's always sort of that judgment. What is legitimate? What isn't legitimate? I try to at least keep it to stuff that I think is coming from a reliable source.
Right. And speaking of like reliable sources, I guess you do bring up an interesting point about, people making up shit all the time as far as the whole Soroka to the Oilers thing. There is one guy who I don't even bother listening to him anymore because he's honestly a fucking idiot. Is Eklund, and sometimes he'll go on his website and he'll say some stupid shit. Like he'll say something like, "Oh, the Islanders might trade Matt Barzal to the Chicago Blackhawks" or something. I'm like, "What source do you have,
Right.
Eklund? You've been doing this for like 25 years, and the only thing he ever got right was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was Jeff Skinner when he got traded to Buffalo 7, 8 years ago."
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand the need to create content. I understand the need to, say something in July and August, but if it's just BS out of left field, you might as well save your breath.
Right.
Right. Exactly. But I actually do have a question for you, and it's about your book. And you've
Okay.
promoted this on every single Lockdown Islanders episode, at least from the last few years. What honestly gave you the inspiration to write Ice Wars, and how long did that process take you?
The inspiration was basically that the rivalry between the Islanders and the Rangers was like my introduction to hockey, in the sense that they met in the playoffs 1975, 1979, 1981, 82, 83, 1984, 1990, and 1994.
Yeah.
So, from the time I was 8 until the time that I was like, uh, what was I in 1994? I guess I was 27. They met in the playoffs like 7 times. And it was some of the best hockey I ever saw. And growing up on Long Island, you had mostly Islander fans at that time because the Islanders were winning their Stanley Cups. You had the dynasty years. But because there were no Islanders before 1972, you had a lot of people. Their parents were Ranger fans. They grew up in the house with Ranger fans. And, some of them became Islander fans, some of them became Ranger fans. So it was always a fun rivalry. I actually played on a deck hockey in a deck hockey league on Long Island. And because we had both Islander fans and Ranger fans, we ended up calling our team the Range Isles, which was really dumb. But we had to compromise because we couldn't agree on a stinking name, So it was like, but that rivalry was what like really got exciting about hockey when I was growing up. And I wanted to share those memories and the idea of going back. And I got to interview Chico Resch and Jean Potvin and Barry Beck and the Alberts and I spoke to Bill Torrey, Emil Francis, Brad Park. Getting to interview all these guys that I grew up with, it was like incredible. And just to hear some of the behind the scenes things that they shared with me. And as far as the other part of your question, it took a little more than 3 years from the time I said, I'm going to start doing this to the time that it was finished and edited and done and submitted. So it was a long process, but I loved every minute of it.
I mean, I'm sure you've gotten some help from like, different people and different like book publishers that pretty much said, please promote my book because I want to share my stories about this 30, 40, 50-year-old rivalry in the state going back to when I was a kid. And I'm sure people really were like hooked onto the idea about that book. Now, granted, I have read the book, but I don't own a copy anymore, unfortunately. It was my late uncle's. And dating back to what you just said about the whole division between Ranger fans and Islander fans, my dad grew up in the same era as you. And before the Islanders, he was actually going to be a Philadelphia Flyers fan when they were in the spectrum. Guys like Bobby Clark and Nick
Yep.
Schultz. Yeah, Ricky McLeish, Bernie Perrant, all those guys. My dad was very advocate about them until the Islanders showed up.
Wow, that's a heck of a flip too. And it's funny because I did get to interview Dave Schultz once. And if I was to go back in time to like 10-year-old me, I would be like, Dave Schultz, like what a bum, what a piece of crap. And then I interviewed him. He was so nice. It was like it was like surreal. Like I'm talking to Dave Schultz and I like the guy, it was like,
yeah,
what's going on?
Nice.
Well, thank you for the correction, by the way, because I said Nick Schultz and you caught me on that, and I appreciate it.
No problem.
So awesome. So thinking about all of the Islanders games that you've been a part of and everything that you have covered, is there a favorite Islander game that you would have either discussed on your show or a favorite Islander memory in the time that the team has been around?
Wow. To me, the best game that I saw was the 1984 playoffs, Game 5, Islanders Rangers. It was a best of 5 series. It went to overtime. Ken Morrow ended up scoring, of all people, a guy who scored like 2 goals a year, ends up with the game-winning overtime goal, and the Islanders dynasty stayed alive. Now, they ended up losing the Cup final that year to Edmonton, but that overtime period, maybe the last 5 minutes of the third period and the 8.5 minutes of overtime may have been some of the best hockey I've ever seen. And that game was just so incredible. And ironically, initially, I didn't have cable at that point. I listened to that game on the radio. And
Nice.
it's on YouTube now. You could watch the game, and that overtime is just incredible. End to end, great chances. The puck bouncing over the stick of Mikko Leninen, and then a minute later, it's in the back of the net from Ken Morrow, of all people. It's just some exciting hockey. And it's funny, I got to interview Don Maloney, who scored the game-tying goal with less than a minute to go to force overtime. And then later, he played for the Islanders and was GM of the Islanders. So I said to him, look, off the record, I said, was it a high stick? Because the Islanders swore it was a high stick. So he says, well, it depends where I am. If I'm here in the Coliseum, I'm not going to say either way. But if you ask me at the Garden, it was a good goal. So that's what he told me.
I mean, that is a fair statement. I mean, considering the guy played for both sides. I mean,
Yes.
I think that's a fair assumption, from that retrospective. But I do want to ask about Locked On. And you've been in multiple outlets now, Locked On Islanders, and recently I found out you're on Locked On NHL. How the fuck do you do that? How were you recruited in the first place, like generally speaking?
I wasn't recruited. What actually happened was I started listening to Locked On Packers, and they weren't on YouTube back then. It was just audio podcasts because I'm a big Packers guy. And I actually sent an email to Locked On saying, hey, I see you guys don't do hockey. If you want to start a hockey division, I'd be more than happy to help you do it. I've been covering the Islanders. This is what I'd like to do. Didn't hear anything back. And then like 2 years later, I saw that they were starting hockey, and so I got in touch with them, sent in my resume and a little demo, and I heard back from them. So that was how I got recruited.
Very cool.
Interesting. And I guess this is a follow-up question to go with it is how the hell do you come up with the material every day? Like, how do you come up with it, let alone making it interesting for everyday listeners? I mean, the consistency that you put on every day, or I should say every other day in the summer, like, how do you do it?
You have to sort of, it's a couple of things. You have to be on top of the news. You have to know, as soon as something happens, you got to sort of be aware of it. And then you sort of have to think big picture so that even if something, relatively small happens, you try to think, okay, how does that thing impact other aspects of the team? And so, if you hear like, okay, the New York Islanders are signing Maxim Shabanov from the KHL. Okay. All right. So you talk first. What do we know about Maxim Shabanov? What's his scouting report? What are his strengths, his weaknesses? Where would he fit into the Islanders lineup, assuming he makes the team? And then you take it a step further. Okay, if he makes the team, whose job does he take? How does that affect the line combinations? And so you could take one bit of information and extrapolate it into 2 or 3 segments of a show or even a whole show, if need be, depending on, how you go about it.
I mean, honestly, that's impressive. I mean, especially with the fact that you take so much information and you're able to turn that into a half an hour show on a weekly basis, that is honestly pretty impressive coming from you.
I enjoy it. I mean, it's work, but it's fun. Like it's something that I would do something similar to that even if I wasn't doing the podcast. I guess I just to keep up with the information, to break it down, to think about it, to synthesize it. But thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. But I really love what I do, and that to me it is sort of the secret sauce.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
that's awesome. And it's kind of like how we got started too, thinking back to when I mean, two of us have known each other going all the way back to 2010 now, and we both had
Nice.
different sites, we were building different things, gone through a few different iterations of it, and then we started our very first long form podcast back in 2019, which we're rebranding now. And thinking about it, just looking back, we thought, hey, it's a COVID era show. Who knows how long we'll last? But we figured, hey, do it because we enjoy it. And then we really started to focus in more on the hockey side. We expanded into football, baseball now is part of it. And in our first iteration, I mean, we're glad we were able to hit 225 shows before we rebranded, and just being on
Sweet.
once a week and doing like a 90-minute segment. But it's one of those things, you got to love what you do, like you mentioned. And when we do it, sure, there's some work that goes into it, but we really enjoy it because it's one of those things where in some cases people may find it's an outlet that they're not getting maybe the full story in some cases, or maybe they're finding a different opinion. And that's one of the things I know with what you've done. And I have been able to listen on Spotify as well. You have a lot of good opinions, and you back up your opinions, and you do a lot of that work and the research to it. So it's definitely one of the things. I mean, honestly, you've got one of the really good shows that's out there. So of course,
Well,
it's a privilege for us to have you here too, and we
Well,
appreciate
I
that.
appreciate that. When you work hard at something and someone appreciates it, that's just a great
Yeah.
feeling. So thank you. It means a lot to me to hear you guys say that. And look, I've been doing Locked On Islanders now. It's been 6 years.
Yeah.
November will be 6 full years. And it flew by like that. And imagine if the
Yeah.
team was winning. I mean, that
Right,
was
just like us at the Sabres if we were
yeah,
winning too,
yeah.
So yeah, and it feels like that with us also. 5 years now, and it flew by. I mean, it's like nobody could have thought it would have gone that quick, but no, just like you're saying, when you enjoy it, you love it,
Yeah.
and it flies by. Um, I did want to ask you now, jumping into the football side, how did you become a Packers fan, and what drew you to that team?
Okay. Two things made me a Packers fan. You got to remember, I was 5 years old. My favorite color was green. There was a team
Okay.
with green uniforms called Green Bay. So damn it, that was going to be my team. Okay.
Nice.
It doesn't
Okay.
have to be any more fancy than that. Right. And then they also, at the time, they had a great running back named John Brockington, who was from Brooklyn, which is where my parents were from.
Well,
So that sort of added a little extra connection to it. But I am a loyal person. So, that was my team at age 5. Needless to say, the Packers in the 70s and 80s were terrible most of the time, but I stuck with them and, got to develop into doing podcasts for them about the Packers and writing articles about them. And yeah, I really enjoy that very much as
very
well.
cool. Yep. You got to go through the Brett Favre era, win some Super Bowls and all of that, which is also great too. And of course, Aaron Rodgers before he left the team a couple years ago now, and which is actually kind of funny. We're going to see him in Pittsburgh in November. So
Yeah, that's crazy. But I
yeah.
always also liked the Bills. I remember OJ as a player. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Same
I,
here.
I remember the 2000-yard season, 2003
Yep.
yard season, and Joe Ferguson and Jim Braxton and,
Mhm.
the Electric Company. Those were some great teams. And I was always a big
Yeah.
Marv Levy fan as well.
Mhm.
So Bills have always been one of my favorite teams. Packers, my favorite, but always liked and appreciated Buffalo.
Yeah, Marv Levy just celebrated his 100th birthday last weekend, so
Yep.
hopefully continued health to him, and actually, it's going to be interesting this year. It's the last season of our stadium before they make the move
Yeah.
across the street, and I will tell you, the big memories two of the bigger memories I can think of. One more recent, one about a little over 10 years ago. I remember being on a red eye flight from Baltimore, Washington, back to Buffalo, and I was on a plane. It was about 11:30 at night, and I hear someone snoring in the front seat, in the seat right in front of me in the row, and we were on Southwest, and I look back, I'm like, is that Jim Kelly? and and it turned out it was him and his brother Frank were on the flight, and I guess they were doing something in DC. But no, really cool guy to meet. I've actually been able to meet Jim a few times, and actually got to talk to him coming off the plane. Sold his brother Frank a bunch of hunting stuff back in the day when I was in retail, so I got to know him a
Nice.
bit and made some good money off of that. And then the more recent memory is Hallmark actually just finished filming Holiday Touchdown on Bill's Love Story here recently in the last month or so. And being able to walk across the 50-yard line at Highmark Stadium is one of the extras was pretty cool. And that's one of the things
Nice.
I'll always remember. Plus, Bobby was at the Dallas game where we beat the living crap out of them that December game where basically Dallas couldn't do anything, and his
No.
one of his Long Island friends had to suffer the misery of defeat.
Yeah, one of my good buddies is like a diehard Cowboys fan, and the whole thing was just a big mess because he was really confident the Cowboys were going to win. I'm like, you guys are going to suck. Just trust me on that. And
Yeah,
sure enough, James Cook's running in for 2 rushing touchdowns for 171 freaking yards, and I'm just standing there. I'm like, I wonder how Milma's doing down there. So,
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And
you
then they
you knew exactly how he was doing.
right, yeah, and then of course we finally spotted them the 7 in the end. So
and he's like, no, I don't want to fucking talk to you right now
right, right.
because he knew I was going to be on
Yeah.
top of him.
Yeah, and he had to drive back with you on top of it. So,
That was
yeah,
glorious.
yeah. But no, I will tell you, just from having seen the new stadium go up, I mean, it's just absolutely crazy with how quick that's happened. And for a while, actually at that time, when we had that Dallas game, the stadium wasn't even built yet. It was just a big pit, like a hole in the ground, and people were diving into it. And for some reason, but just from what it is now, think of it going into UBS Arena with the steep deck and the sight lines, and that's what they're doing in the new Highmark Stadium, where they wanted to really make it steeper than all hell to really give you a really close up to the field position. And apparently the way that the decks are set up, they're even mentioning like the upper deck is like 50 some feet closer to the field than it is in the current stadium, which is how they
Nice.
stacked everything. And plus, I love the fact they're going to natural grass.
Yes, I like that too. I have been to many dome stadiums, and yeah, it's great when it's freezing outside that you're not freezing. But as a fan to watch the game, there's nothing like natural
Mhm.
grass, wind,
Yep.
snow, rain. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
bring it. That makes for some
Yeah,
great football
yeah,
memories.
and that's how we were when that Dallas game happened. And it was all rainy and everything in
Yep.
December. It's like, hey, let it be that. I don't care how bad it is. I've been to snow games, or I've been in multiple layers and pack boots, and it's like
Oh
that's
yeah.
what we do. That's what football is. You're in the elements.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, there's a place for warm weather games too, but the memorable, like the Ice Bowl wouldn't be the Ice Bowl if it was
Right.
55 degrees, I mean, that just
Hmm.
doesn't it
Yeah.
just doesn't work that
Right.
way.
Or with what you guys had in Green Bay, the frozen field. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of those things. Those are things you always talk about. Or even when we had that big snow game against the Indianapolis Colts several years ago,
Yep.
where literally a storm just dumped snow like right during the game, and they were having to go ahead and like bulldoze like the sidelines and everything out. So, those are always fun to be a part of.
They are. And those are the stuff that memories are made of, and it just adds something to the game. Playing on artificial turf, harder on the players for their
Hmm.
long-term health, short-term health,
Yeah.
and it just takes away, there's something about having a little mud and dirt and snow and on the jerseys, and it just shows you,
Yeah.
hey, these guys are out there working their asses off in
Right.
the, it just, it's too clean on artificial turf.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. I mean, I even in my office here, next to me, and I know you're not able to see it, but I actually have a piece of the Highmark Stadium turf when they tore it out.
Oh, nice.
And I remember seeing it, I'm like, That stuff's got some crumb rubber in it still when I picked up the piece." And they spray painted a blue buffalo on it, and of course it has a certificate of authenticity and everything. I'm like, man, just give me some dirt, mud, and everything else, and let it be a day. Throw on those cleats and go for it.
Love it.
Absolutely. I actually am curious about something. How many Packers games have you been to in Green Bay?
I've been to two in Green Bay. I've seen them play in a lot of other stadiums, but I've been to two in Green Bay, one in 1986 and one in 2017.
Nice.
There you go.
Uh,
Yeah, Lambeau is one of those places I really want to visit.
you should. It's almost like a pilgrimage. It's it
Yeah.
was really great. The first time I was attending the University of Michigan, and I said to myself, "You're never going to be closer geographically to Green Bay than
Right.
this." So I rented a car. Went with my girlfriend at the time, drove around Lake Michigan. It was 7 hours each way,
Hmm.
and saw the Packers get killed by the Houston Oilers. Packers were up 3-0. They lost 31-3. So that
Oh,
was
damn.
it was
So,
ugly, but it was a great experience.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned the pilgrimage part of it, because it's actually something that the two of us have really started to do over the last several years. And this past October we took the long flight out to Seattle, and we spent a week out there, and got to see the Bills destroy the Seahawks in
Nice.
one of Geno Smith's last games before he got traded. But just seeing the amount of the Bills fans that were there, it was crazy to see. It was like 60-40 in terms of how everything was divided up. And going on field for the stadium tour was a lot of fun also. But then we also took our loss in Cincinnati the year before. So we ended up
Yeah.
having to take the walk across the river over to Newport, and where we were staying. So we did that. Then we went to Kansas City the year before, and got to see a nice win, and just seeing how they tailgated, it was similar to here, which is, I would say, it's probably similar to what you guys do in at Green Bay. But one of the things I remember is a Kansas City Chiefs fan talking to us for about, what was it, almost an hour and a half after the game before they
some
kicked us out of the lot because they were
something
finally
like it.
cleaning it up.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. But nah, it's just great to see all the fan bases come together like that, and especially whichever side you're on. Of course, if it's Jets Giants, that's one thing, but
Right. Yeah, and you know what the good thing is? Uh, 90% of the fans are nice,
yeah,
like maybe more. I mean, uh, even I remember sitting outside the Nassau Coliseum waiting for playoff tickets one year, and there were Ranger fans and there were Islander fans, and they got along so well. I mean, there was fun back and forth, don't get me
yeah,
wrong, but it was all in fun, and everyone was respectful, and everyone was like, I hope you get
Yeah.
the tickets, and all of that stuff. 90 something percent of fans are great, and then there's always that drunken few that
Yep.
just kind of screw everything up for
Oh yeah.
everybody. But uh, and I've seen some fans do some pretty crazy things over the
Yeah.
years, but
Same here.
90 something percent of fans are great and respectful, and they're like, hey, you're rooting for the other team, but enjoy the game, and if you win, screw you. If you lose, ha ha, but
Right.
so be it, that kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, and it reminds me of the one time I was at a Bills game when Washington came to town here and ended up getting beer dumped all over me by a Commanders fan, and then of course the fan got ejected along with a few other
Yeah.
people. But I'm like, hey, it happens. I know it comes with the territory sometimes too. Well, plus I think he was just pissed off because we were beating the living hell out of him. I think like 31-3 at the time, but which then I think it was like 54 something by the time it was done.
Yeah.
But no, it reminds me like when we've been to some different cities now with visiting some of the different games. I mean, Seattle, great fan base, and we got to meet some really cool people out there. Actually, Randall Morris was a lot of fun. We got to get an autograph from him and talk with
Nice.
him a bit during their stadium experience that they have every game day. And then thinking about Cincinnati, one of the things actually, one of our previous hosts who was on, Rob, it was funny. We were at the Moorline Lager House, which is only a couple blocks away from Paycor Stadium, and there were some Cincinnati fans that came up to us, and they were all cool to us, and
Here we go.
basically to me, Bob, and his wife, he's like, "Good luck, good luck, good luck," and then of course our friend Rob wearing the Steelers jersey, "Fuck you," is how it went.
Well, you got
And
to
Rob
draw the
and
line
Rob even
somewhere, right?
yeah, and Rob even said, "It's like I'm gonna die today in the stadium."
As I remember saying to him, I'm like, Rob, you sure you don't want to take that shit off? He's like, no, I love this. And I'm like, you're an idiot.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like what was worse, wearing a Steelers jersey or wearing a Cleveland Browns jersey there because there was
Yeah.
something with that too.
Well, wearing a Browns jersey, in Gil's defense, wearing a Browns jersey is just the equivalent of disappointment. And I think anybody would know that.
Right. Yeah. And their stadium just got voted. They just that got a new snag too. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
that and then Kansas City, the fans were great also, and
I've heard only
we
good things.
yeah, they're a really good group of people. They love the sports just like all of us do, and a great group of people. And actually, we got to tailgate with some of them, so it was pretty neat.
Sweet.
Absolutely. But I actually do have a question for you about the whole Packers Islanders thing. How do you manage to keep everything intact regarding all the work you do regarding PackersPost.com to Locked On?
You just sort of set time aside. I mean, it doesn't always work. You can't, uh, make everything neat because news breaks and you got to stop what you're doing and deal with it. But usually I budget my time. I'll set aside, 2-3 hours in the afternoon to write an article. I'll set aside 2 hours, 3 hours to prepare and record and edit a podcast. Whatever needs to be done, you just sort of set your time. And the other the crazy thing is Sundays for me, because I do the Monday edition of Locked On NHL. So I have to interview three of my fellow NHL hosts on Locked On about their teams and big stories that are going on. If there's a Packers game, I have to cover the game, write an article about it, and then I have to do a Locked On Islanders. So Sunday during the fall, like between September and January, is insane for me. But somehow it works. What can I tell you? Somehow
Sure.
I make it work. And sometimes you're flying by the seat of your pants. I'm not gonna lie. And sometimes you go to bed really, really late, but I
Mhm.
love it. So it's worth it.
Damn, that's
Awesome.
dedication. That
Awesome.
is pure dedication. No question about that whatsoever. I mean, I love the idea how you just say, I'm covering the Packers game, but I have to do three interviews in the process and then just kind of blending it all together. I honestly, I don't think me and Tom would be able to do that. It's like, we're hardcore Bills fans. The Bills are on Sunday, and if God forbid we have to reach out to someone else and we'd be like, yo, do you want to do an interview with us? They'll be able to say yes or no, or worst case scenarios, they say no sometimes, not always, but sometimes we have to come up with other stuff to talk about throughout the week. It's like, okay, Tom, what do we have to talk about? And he's like,
Mhm.
oh, let's just talk about some guy who just won on IL 10 days ago. So that's that's
Some
literally,
random thing.
yeah, some random ass thing that just came out of nowhere. But we have fun with it. I think that's something that we take a lot of pride in, is that, we're fans ultimately, but we're there for the fans and by the fans.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is this: if you love what you do, the fans know it. If you're faking, if you're full of BS when you get up there and talk about a team, fans sense that.
Oh
And
yeah.
like across the Locked On network, and I speak to all the other hosts all the time. Sometimes if you're not from the city that you're covering, fans are initially suspicious. They know, hey,
Mhm.
you're not from Winnipeg or you're not from St. Louis.
Right.
Do you really love this team, or are you just doing this as a job? And, you know, eventually, if you do love the team and you do love the sport, that gets transmitted to the fans and they accept you most of the time. You're never going to please all the people all the time, obviously.
Sure.
But, if you're faking it, fans know that too.
Absolutely. But I am curious about something else, because in every episode you always say the Islanders' birthday of the day. How do
Yes.
you manage to find the dates?
Okay. There is a website, hockeydatabase.com,
Okay.
hockeyhd.com. And on Hockey Database, you can pull up the roster of every player who ever played for your team. And then you can sort it by points, goals, assists. And one thing you could sort it by is date of birth. So you have to go through the whole list because it doesn't go like January 1st, 1948, January 1st, 1950. It goes January 1st, 1948, January 3rd, 1948, February 8th, 19, and then it goes all the way down. So I often have to look through the whole list, but once a week I go through the list, pick out 5 guys during the season, 3 guys now during the off season. And I'm not always going to nail it exactly. Like, I did Glenn Healy for today's show as the birthday of the day. His birthday is Saturday, so I was off by 2 or 3 days. But you know, I kind of like doing that. I love the history of it, and it's just fun to look back at some of these players and some of their better games and just have fun with it.
Yeah. Or even a lot of times when we've covered the NHL draft and we've had some fun doing that. And I remember this was maybe a couple years ago when we were live and we saw the Columbus Blue Jackets pick Yegor Chinakhov and we're like, where the hell did this guy come from? Because he wasn't even in the top 200. And
Right.
then it's almost like he came out of nowhere and now he has actually panned out fairly well for them, but we're like, who is this guy? It's like we've never even heard of him really in most circles. So it's kind of interesting. Or the time where we had to have fun with the plus minus ratings and finding
Oh
out
God.
that former Sabre, now of course he's been with the Flyers, Rasmus Ristolainen at a minus 179, which is like the lowest out of any active player. We're like, oh man,
For his career.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
that
I
is
I
rough.
just interviewed the player who has the record for the lowest plus minus in a season.
Mhm.
His name is Bill Mickelson. He was an original Islander, and
Okay.
then he was an original Washington Capital. And when he was with the original Washington Capitals, which is a team that played 80 games
Hmm.
and won 8, okay, uh, he had the worst plus minus of any one season in the history of the NHL. And I'm looking it up now. He was a minus 82 in 59 games.
Ouch.
God damn.
So,
Damn, that's
yeah,
bad.
yeah,
I mean, I'd probably have
Yikes.
that stat too if I played for the expansion Capitals.
exactly. It's not his fault,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
he
it's
was the
just
nicest guy. I'm
yeah,
going to air that interview very shortly.
awesome.
And his son actually eventually played briefly in the NHL as well, which was pretty cool.
Very cool.
But very nice guy. Played for 2 of the worst teams in NHL history: the expansion Islanders and then the expansion Capitals. He went from a 12-win team to an 8-win team. Not 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 a good look,
Right. No, I got you. I got you there. But One of the things we also wanted to ask as well is for let's say people are looking to get into podcasting and they're looking to create something new. What would be some advice that you would give somebody that's thinking about it and want to jump in?
Number one, got to do something that you're passionate about. If you, no matter what it is, you could talk about knitting. Okay, if you love knitting, and you can share that love with other people who love knitting, you can do something that you and I might think, wow, that's the most boring thing in the world. But for people who like it, you share it, they appreciate it. So the internet can bring people together around common likes from all over the world. The next thing I would say is practice. Even if you don't post it, even if you don't do it, practice, even if you don't publish it, practice, do it. The more you do it, the better you'll get. Even if you can just get a couple of trusted people to listen to you and just say, okay, what am I doing? What can I do better? You have to listen to yourself, but keep doing it. And then if somebody offers you an opportunity to do it without pay, do that first and get the experience. You could take 8 million courses, you could watch a million videos on YouTube about how to do it, but until you do it, you don't work out the kinks, you don't figure out your own style, you don't eventually those things fall into place by doing it.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. And hey, and there's times you have to take those bumps and things don't
Yeah.
go exactly how you plan, but then it's like once you figure out how you're going about it, like you said, it's a good thing. And I remember even when we first started, there were times we went 4 hours long and we had a lot of different things on there, and then we finally narrowed it down to the sports aspect and instead of just throwing some of the everyday things in there too. And like you said, you keep doing it and keep going at
Yeah.
it and keep trying different things and find what works.
Yeah, and look, you want to do the everyday things, you could make that a separate podcast if you wanted to. So
Yeah,
it it's all good. It's all good.
yeah, definitely.
Without a doubt. I mean, we've had our ups and downs, but we've also had our botched interviews in the past, with one being Clint Malarchuk in 2018.
Oh
That
boy.
was a
Oh boy.
why? Well, the reason for it was we were using a different software at the time, not Zoom. This was before Zoom.
Right.
What was it called, Tom? Like Sky?
Um, well, we'll just say this. I'm not going to disclose it on here because I don't want to get sued by that other software company. But let's just say it was a one and done for them because the audio was so screwed up on there. We actually had to break out the cell phone and use cell phone audio to cover Clint Malarchuk actually being on with us for an hour. And
Uh,
it's like you feel so bad because it's a technical aspect that you couldn't see it happening, but still it's just that was just one of those interviews. I'm like, man, I wish we could do that over.
yeah, and look, technology sometimes glitches. There's nothing you
Yeah.
can do about it. And I remember I mentioned John Brockington when I was a kid, my favorite Packer, and I did get to interview him once before he passed. And there was a problem with the connection. So I could barely hear his answers. I'm asking questions. I heard maybe one out of every 3 or 4 words that he said. And even though the audio of the podcast was fine, I couldn't hear him on my phone connection. And it was so frustrating. It's like, I dreamed of interviewing this guy, and I
Yeah.
can't even hear half the things he's saying. It was very, very frustrating. But you learn to roll with it and you do the best you can. That's all you can do.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I mean, we know, hey, technology happens. I mean, there's times we've lost connections and different things during different parts of our show or like part of the time. I remember once we were going and my end froze up, and then there's times, sometimes he may freeze up, and it just happens. But it's one of those things. We still enjoy what we do. It's still fun to talk to people. It's still fun to get opinions out, and I mean, you're always going to have someone that agrees, or maybe they don't agree with everything altogether. But that's the fun part because everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's entitled to an opinion, and we just want to get out there and hey, have people make their own decisions on it.
Absolutely. Look, I'm putting out opinions on the Islanders podcast every show. And I'm not expecting everyone to agree with me all the time. And I think it's great when they don't agree with me, as long as they're respectful about it.
Right.
You know, if they get into name calling and personal BS, that, you know, that I'm not going to take. But, you know, you can disagree with me from now until the cows come home, as long as you're respectful about it. It adds something to the show. It adds something to the conversation, the comments on YouTube. And I answer every comment on YouTube that people put on Locked On Islanders. I will take time to respond to the comment. And again, as long as people are respectful, and you'd be surprised what some people complain about,
Oh
but
yeah.
I mean, you know,
Oh yeah, we've seen that
I,
here too.
I would love to
I'm
hear
sure.
this.
No, I mean, like, you know, one person actually complained that I mentioned my book in every show, and it takes 10 seconds to mention the book on every show. Furthermore, it wasn't my idea. The guys at Locked On said you got to establish your credentials at the
Hmm.
beginning of every show so that people who are tuning in know why they should care about your opinion. So part of my credentials is I've been covering the team for almost 2 decades, and I wrote this damn book. So and so this guy texts me, "Why do you mention your book at every show?" And I'm like, dude, it takes 10 seconds out of a 30-minute show for me to mention the existence of the book. If you don't like it, fast forward. You know, it's like,
Right.
it's one thing if I was spending half the show talking about it, but they said you got to establish your credentials. So you should mention the book, and you should mention how long you've been covering the team. It literally is 10 seconds, maybe not even that long, but somebody was, you know, why do you have to keep mentioning, you know,
Yeah.
okay. If that's what bothers you, I'm doing something else right. Because, you know,
Right.
but, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, or even one of the big things that happened here in the Buffalo area yesterday was the former Sabres owner Tom Golisano donating $50 million to Kaleida Health, and they're going to rename the Children's Hospital after him, which will
right.
be the fourth children's hospital that'll have his name now. But people were complaining about the name change. I'm like, just be happy that somebody donated $50 million to help kids. I mean, come on.
Exactly. It's not like you know, some terrible organization is donating
Right,
this money, and you know
right,
we're going to rename it after, you know, Adolf Hitler or something like that. You
Oh
know,
right.
God, no,
Oh
no, no,
you
no.
know
God.
exactly. This is
Oh,
not what
Jesus.
we're doing. This rich
Right.
man, who you may or may not like, donated good money for a good cause.
Yeah.
You know, if that's your biggest complaint, so be it. You know,
Right. Yeah, and the same thing happened in 2017 when the current hospital opened, where the current name came out of a $10 million gift, and it's like, seriously, just be glad it's being used for something good, and
Exactly.
instead of
And if you
complaining about the
really hate
name.
it that much, earn $15 million and build your own darn hospital. You
Right.
know,
Or
Yeah,
if you want to
really.
bid, or if you want to bid 51 million, there you go.
there you
It's
go. You
like
can name it after
you can
yourself
name it
or
after
anything else
yourself.
you want to name it after, right?
Right, right. Or it's just like sports naming, right? Same thing. It's like, hey, it helps the team. It helps with getting players. If you don't like it, put up.
I mean, I don't love it. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah,
And I'll tell you why I don't love it. The one reason I don't love it, it changes.
sure.
Like every 5 years, they get a different sponsor. And like for years, forever, the Odd was in Buffalo, the
Yeah.
Spectrum was in Philadelphia, the Omni was in Atlanta. You
Hmm.
knew the name. Like if you mention the name of the Philadelphia Arena, I'm like, what year is it? Who was sponsoring it then? Who's sponsoring it now?
Right.
Like, I
Right.
wish the naming rights would just be done once and it just stayed that way for the life of
Sure.
the building. I know why they don't do it that way,
Hmm.
but when the same building has had 3 names in 10 years, you just
Oh
get to be
yeah.
like, it's just Buffalo or it's just
Yeah.
Philly or it's just, you know, whatever city it is. After a while, the name means nothing because there have been so many of them.
Right. And Philly's just changed again. They just put
Yes.
a new name on there. Now they switched to Xfinity Mobile. So
Yeah.
Comcast decided to do that after Wells Fargo pulled out, which then of course I remember when they nicknamed it the FU Center when First Union
Oh
had
my
it.
God.
Or what was it in Houston where the company that got into trouble was the sponsor of the Astros stadium at
Enron.
one?
Yeah,
Enron,
Enron
yes,
Field.
Enron Field. Yes, it's like, okay, that goes over really well.
Yeah, that was real quick and short-lived. Or actually, it's interesting too. Tampa just renamed their arena just this past week, also. So now they're putting a new brand on there, and they're naming it after a hedge fund. I'm like, oh boy. So,
Yeah. I mean, you could be worse. It could be Nashville. Like what I think, if I'm not mistaken, Gil, you might remember this, is that when the stadium that they currently live in now, Bristol Arena, when it first opened, I believe it was called the Gaylord
It
Entertainment
was.
it
Center.
It
was,
was.
it
Yes.
was, yeah. And I have
Someone
family that
was
lives
high on
there,
drugs when they made that. I'm sorry.
Or just that was somebody's last name. I mean,
right?
who was
Oh my
responsible
God.
for building or
Yeah.
in some way for the arena, for the team, whatever it was. But yeah, I mean that people did, for better or for worse, snicker when they heard that name. I
Yeah.
mean,
It was just absolutely, it was just crazy about it. And Gaylord Entertainment, I mean, they've done a lot with country music and different
yep.
things. I know with the old with the Ryman Auditorium, that's still there too. So it's interesting to see how things go. And even in Buffalo, we've had multiple names since the KeyBank Center opened in '96, because I remember it was Marine Midland Arena, then it changed their parent name HSBC, and then they became the first Niagara Center when HSBC exited out of most of the U.S. And then, of course, KeyBank Center ended up being what it is now after they bought out First Niagara, and then now they just re-upped for like another 10 years or something like that. So
Right.
it's actually going to keep a name for a while finally, which
Yeah. And I mean, when you start naming after banks or insurance companies, that happens because they all buy each other out. I mean,
yeah,
I
Yeah.
stayed in the same branch of the same bank, but it had three names because they just kept buying each other out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, to give you an idea what Tampa's is known now, they just announced it. It's called Benchmark International Arena.
That's a
There you go.
mouthful. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
BIA,
That's a
BIA.
mouthful.
Yep.
I mean, because God forbid you name your stadium after a bank after 30 plus years. Like, oh my God, I mean, if you're in Buffalo and you have to, listen to that shit for the next like 3 decades, it's like, why do you have to name your stadium after banks? Like, why can't you just be more creative or something? Like,
Yeah.
why don't you call it something like the Frozen Tundra or something like that? Why
Yeah.
do you have to be
Yeah.
generic? And then, or no, I have a better one. Why don't we just call it the Waterfall Center because of what happened at the
Yeah.
Goo Goo Dolls concert recently? Why don't we
There you
do
go.
that? Just turn that
Oh
into a
yeah, the
freaking water
busted
park.
sprinkler pipe that happened. Actually, it was during Disney's Frozen, so
Oh,
it's
wow.
like, hey, perfect timing. But no, it
But
could be
you can get a
worse.
nickname. You can get a nickname. Lambeau Field, the Frozen Tundra,
Yeah,
right? Like the Tampa Stadium used to be the Big Sombrero. So you get
right.
nicknames even if they're not the official name,
Yeah,
and those are more
yeah.
fun, really.
Yeah, or even when we had it known as the first Niagara Center, people called it the FN Center.
That's right.
So kind of like a take on the FU Center in
Right. Well, better
Philly.
that it
But
wasn't First United, right? I think.
yeah, exactly. Although it could be worse, could be LA Crypto.com after
Yeah.
cryptocurrency.
I
But
hate that.
yeah, me too. But then I remember before Miami, actually, the Miami Heat renamed their arena, and I think it's called the Kaseya Center now. But in the time they were renaming it from American Airlines Arena, there was actually I know they named it FTX, and of course the guy who owned that got brought up on like a lot of international federal charges and stuff for cryptocurrency. But there was actually a time someone I remember like an adult film company was trying to put a name on there too. And I'm like, oh God, please don't. So, and the name that they were thinking, I'm like, oh boy.
God
So,
help us all. We need
yeah,
Jesus at that point.
exactly. It's like I don't care what they're gonna say, that ain't gonna be family friendly at all.
No,
So,
no, never.
They can't even come up with family-friendly movie titles. So it's
yeah,
like,
exactly. Exactly. So,
Yeah, no one would watch that if it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like that's just wild.
right, right. So it's just crazy, like how some of them go. But yeah, Philly and Tampa got new names this year, so that's what they're doing. And then hopefully they'll redo our place at some point after the busted sprinkler pipe. So
You know damn well they're not going to.
no, because ownership's freaking cheap. They want to finish this new stadium first.
Yeah, I know that. I'm just saying. I mean, God forbid we have to wear a raincoat to go to Sabres games every now and then.
Yeah, really. I'm just glad they finally got us a new scoreboard last year that actually works. Because I remember
Oh my
being in,
God, a scoreboard. That's so
yeah.
magical.
Well, remember last time you were there and it kept blacking out like on the lower halo?
Yeah, because it was a piece of shit. That's
Yeah,
why.
it was like one of the oldest ones. It was going back to 2007. They finally decided to get like a good sized screen that actually
Oh,
works.
I'm just saying, man. That's all
Yeah.
I'm implying.
Now they just have to get actual new seats in the building that don't have wooden two by fours holding up the armrests.
Pretty much so.
Yeah, but oh man. But I was gonna say, I know we could keep going on some different things, but were there any other questions, Bobby, that you had in mind?
I just want to say, Gil, thank you for coming on the show tonight. It's truly an honor, and we would love to have you again in the near future.
Anytime you guys want to do it, as long as it fits into the schedule, as long as the Islanders aren't playing on that night,
Awesome.
I'm good. So it's been a pleasure, guys, and thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to talk to you. I know we had a lot of laughs as well, a lot of fun stuff. So, yeah, absolutely. Come back anytime. You're always welcome here.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks again, Gil. Have a good night.